Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Two Way tonight. I'm Mark Halperin, joining you live from the Olive Tree Cafe in Greenwich Village here in New York City, where in just 2 hours we'll be debating our new program called Table 17. It's the table I'm sitting at here in this restaurant. Senator Bob Kerrey will join us. Sherrod Small, the comedian, will join us, and Michael Moynihan, my two-way colleague, Noam Dorman, who owns this restaurant, and the Comedy Cellar, which sits below. We hope you'll join us, not on YouTube, but live on the two-way platform at 8 o'clock. We'll have music, we'll have comedy, we'll have conversation. Senator Bob Kerrey, who lives in Greenwich Village, will be here, as I said. Today, I'd say news was made in three areas that we'll cover. One was at the White House, one was on Capitol Hill, one was in Saudi Arabia. We had expected the president to make his news in his 5 o'clock Eastern time speech at the Comedy Cellar. I'm sorry, at the Comedy Cellar, at the Business Roundtable. But he did not make much news there. Where he did make news was on the White House South Lawn, where he and Elon Musk peddled Teslas. Well,
Oh no.
Right, guys, look like we lost Mark for a moment. Um, just bear with us for a moment.
that everybody, I'm back. As I was saying before I was interrupted, um, the Business Roundtable wasn't much news, but this event on the South Lawn was. So we'll show you a bunch of that. And then tell you about what happened in Saudi Arabia, the discussions between the U.S. and Ukraine, and Congress, where I'll reveal there they passed the bill extending the budget till September in the House. One Republican, Mr. Massey, voted of Kentucky voted no. One Democrat, Jared Golden of Maine, voted yes. So Speaker Johnson did what he said he was going to do. He passed that bill through. On the presidential side at the White House, President Trump and Elon Musk, it was just another one of these events that the president, not on his schedule, that's just kind of jaw-dropping. Never been anything like it. He talked about a range of subjects, and we'll show that to you. But he stood on the lawn with Elon Musk with some Teslas there, and he basically picked a red one that he was going to buy, and then he sold Teslas. There's a photo on Twitter, I think it's real, of the president holding like the price list of how much different Tesla models cost. And he and Musk sat there. Musk answered some of the questions. The president answered most of them. And he had like a rolling press conference, but they talked a lot about the cars. It was a little bizarre. The other news that was made today on tariffs, again, just as I've told you, I'm not going to every night tell you every court decision related to Doge and other actions by the administration, because you just don't know which ones are going to stick. I'm not going to tell you about everything back and forth with the tariffs. In brief, the president announced this morning at 10 on the Eastern on social that there were going to be higher tariffs on Canada. Then the Canadian premier backed down on his energy tariffs, and the president backed down on some, but not all of the Canadian tariffs. So, and a day when the message to the president from so many was, we need more stability on your policies related to tariffs. We can't have on again, off again. He did on again, off again, explicitly on again, off again with Canada. We'll see how that goes. All right, let's play some of what he said. Again, kind of incredible. Let's start with the talks in Saudi. Secretary Rubio was there. The National Security Advisor, Mr. Walls, was there. Basically, the deal that they've struck is that the Ukrainians have agreed to work towards a ceasefire. Recall that was a sticking point, that one of the many things Zelensky did to piss off Donald Trump was to say peace is a long way off. Well, now they say they're willing to talk about a ceasefire. The U.S. reacted by reinstituting both intelligence cooperation and aid to Ukraine. Again, if you're someone who says whatever Trump does with Ukraine, as long as the result is the right one, which is a deal that secures Ukrainian safety, European safety, even if it gives up some land, is a good deal. That's the deal he's going for. That's the deal he basically ran on. So here's first, we'll listen to the president in a second, but here's Secretary Rubio. This is number 7, Sam, talking in Saudi Arabia after 5 hours of meetings with the Ukrainians.
We made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation. I want to personally we both want to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, His Majesty, for hosting us, for making this possible. They've been instrumental in this process, and we're very grateful to them for hosting us here today. And hopefully we'll take this offer now to the Russians. And we hope that they'll say yes, to peace. The ball is now in their court. And but again, the president's objective here is, number one, above everything else, he wants the war to end. And I think today Ukraine has taken a concrete step in that regard. We hope the Russians will reciprocate.
So that's Rubio. Here is the National Security Advisor, Mr. Waltz, again speaking after the 5-hour meeting with the Ukrainian delegation.
Think about it. We've gone from if the war is going to end to now how the war is going to end, and this was an important first step, and that was under President Trump's leadership. He has literally moved the entire global conversation to where we had a very senior Ukrainian delegation with us today. We've had engagements with our Russian counterparts, and now it's how the war is going to end, and that's under President Trump's leadership.
So these are two very competent guys. They seem to be getting along very well by all accounts in their public appearances. It's unusual, right, to have the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor fly halfway around the world to engage in talks like this together. Typically, in both administrations, it's just one of the two. But these two guys seem to be doing it together, and we'll see. Are we headed back now towards more meeting between U.S. and Russia? We know the president's envoy is planning to go to Russia. Or are we going to see direct face-to-face Ukraine-Russia conversations? Will be interesting to see. But you have to believe, as Sean suggested this morning on morning meeting, that the mood music is good. The feelings about where this is headed towards a settlement seem very good. There's still plenty of people in the United States and in Europe who don't want there to be a deal that involves giving Russia anything in reward for their invasion of Ukraine. Trump administration's position is you deal with the hand you have. That's the only way to get this settled. All right, so that's let's listen to Trump on this. This is a brief soundbite from the president from his Tesla press conference. Number 2, please.
Spoke to Vladimir Putin. Yeah, I want to look, that's the other, it takes 2 to tango, as they say, right? So hopefully he'll also agree, and I really think that would be 75% of the way. The rest is getting it documented and, negotiating land positions, etc.
So you'll talk to him this week?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, and number 4 on the same topic, please.
But very importantly, and I said it, Ukraine, ceasefire. Ukraine, ceasefire. Just agreed to a little while ago. Now we have to go to Russia, and hopefully President Putin will agree to that also, and we can get this show on the road. We can get this horrible war where 2,000-3,000 soldiers a week, every week, 2,000, 4,000 sometimes. I get the reports, and they're not American soldiers. They're Ukrainian and they're Russian. But people are being killed outside of that. People are being killed in the cities as things explode throughout the cities. And we want to get that war over with. So I think it's a very big, I think it's a big difference between the last visit you saw at the Oval Office and this. So that's a total ceasefire. Ukraine has agreed to it, and hopefully Russia will agree to it. We're going to meet with them later on today and tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to wipe out a deal. But I think the ceasefire is very important. If we can get Russia to do it, that'll be great. If we can't, we just keep going on, and people are going to get killed. Lots of people.
I, like you, was just watching Elon's son, Little X there. Wasn't paying any attention to what the president said, but apparently said something about Ukraine. Again, if you want to get into the conversation here, please raise your hand. As always, ask for peace, love, and understanding and the presumption of grace towards all if you're in the conversation or in the chat on YouTube. All right, on the stock market, on the tariffs. Again, if we're looking for the president to quote unquote get the message from the markets and from some of his supporters that he needs to be more consistent. As I said, slap tariffs verbally on Canada this morning, unslap them verbally tonight. Here is the president talking in that same thing with Musk about the stock market. Number 5, please.
What is your message, President Trump? Buying a new car while there are some folks who will see this clip at home and they are struggling with their retirement accounts down at the moment, uncertainty about work ahead.
Well, I think they're going to do great. I think our country had to do this. We had to go and do this. They've taken away, other countries have taken away our business. They've taken away our jobs. I did it initially very strongly against, as you know, China and some others in the first term. And it was a very successful term. We had no inflation. We had the greatest economy in the history of our country. And then we had COVID, which we had to straighten out. So I didn't want to be doing anything with respect to other countries at that time. And we did a great job with it. We handed the stock market over. It was higher than it ever was. And think of that, higher than it ever was to that point before. And nobody thought that was even possible. We did a great job. But we had the greatest economy in history. This economy, in my opinion, is going to blow it away. But what I have to do is I have to get the workers back. I have to get the factories open. We have 90,000 factories and plants are closed from what you had just prior to NAFTA, which is not very long ago. 90,000, think of it, 90,000 factories and plants are closed from what it was. And it's just not right. So, and we gave it away. Presidents before me gave it away, and I could name every one of them. But they gave it away, and we're taking it back. We're taking our jobs back.
So the reporters asked the president different versions of the question. Are you worried about a recession? What would you say to people concerned about the stock market? He did change kind of his mood and tone on the question of will there be a recession. He didn't guarantee there wouldn't, but he leaned away from what he'd said on Sunday that caused such an uproar when he suggested there might be a recession. He basically said he thought the American economy would boom. Here he is talking about the business climate a little while later, not that long ago, at the Business Roundtable event in front of Fortune 100 CEOs. Number 1, please.
A lot of investment coming into our country, much more than I've ever seen. Apple is investing $500 billion. IBM was with us yesterday, and they're investing a lot. Just companies all over. I could name them. You've read most of them, many of them. But hundreds of billions of dollars is being invested. That wouldn't have happened if I didn't win the election, number 1. And I think, number 2, the tariffs are having a tremendously positive impact. They will have, and they are having. We have car companies that are not building in Mexico now. They're building in the United States. Some of them, the plants were already started, and they stopped construction, and now they're going to build in the United States. It was very unfair. They'd build in Mexico and sell them across the border with no tax, no nothing. They'd take away our jobs. They'd close up places in Michigan and all over the country, and they'd build them in Mexico. In many cases, they were owned by China. Built in Mexico, owned by China. And that's all stopped now. They're all coming here. Honda is building a massive plant in different places, Indiana, South Carolina, but also in Michigan, a lot in Michigan. A lot of activity is happening. They're looking all over the place for places, and that's because there is a good spirit. There's a renewed spirit, and also, very importantly, the tariffs are, they don't want to pay 25% or whatever it may be. It may go up higher, maybe go up higher. Look, the higher it goes, the more likely it is they're going to build. And ultimately, the biggest win is not the tariff. That's a big win. That's a lot of money. But the biggest win is if they move into our country and produce jobs. That's a bigger win than the tariffs themselves. But the tariffs are going to be throwing off a lot of money to this country. And we've been ripped off for years by other countries, many, many decades. And they were doing the same thing. But I think we'll do it better. And I think we have a bigger advantage because we really are the piggy bank. They weren't.
So the Business Roundtable folks are in DC. A lot of them are having separate meetings with White House officials, and they don't love tariffs and they don't love the uncertainty. If you'd asked them 2 weeks ago, are you glad Trump won, as opposed to Kamala Harris, they'd say yes. Lower taxes, more energy, less regulation. And again, as we emphasized yesterday, it seems like a million years ago, there was a lot of unhappiness with the uncertainty and with the impact that tariffs were having, and a lack of certainty that Trump was going to have the economy revved up in a way that businesses want. There's a little bit more calm today, a little bit more calm. Market's not as bad, and the tariffs coming off the Canadians. It's still a work in progress. Still a work in progress. All right. A few more things I want to show you, and then again, get to your questions. Please raise your hand if you want in on the conversation. Two things from the White House press briefing. Caroline Leavitt. First of all, there are certainly people around Trump who think that what Elon Musk said about Social Security on Sunday in his or yesterday rather with Larry Kudlow was not great about entitlements and cutting entitlements. And although they're put out a press release today saying that Musk was taken out of context. And frankly, if you take exactly what Musk said, he wasn't saying we're going to cut and eliminate Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. He wasn't. If you take literally what he said he wanted to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. But he exaggerated how much waste, fraud, and abuse is, as they've been doing. And he certainly spoke in a careless way. Some people think he needs to not speak about things like that. Some people close to Trump. Caroline Leavitt chose to pretty aggressively defend Musk today when asked about his comments. Here she is on number 8, please, going back at the media on accusations that Musk said he wanted to eliminate entitlements.
Ask about some comments Elon Musk made yesterday. He said that there is $500 to $700 billion in waste and fraud and entitlement spending. He called it, quote, the big one to eliminate. Earlier this month, he also referred to Social Security as a Ponzi scheme. Should Americans expect changes, big changes, to Social Security and Medicare?
President Trump has been unequivocally clear on this. He is going to protect Social Security and Medicare benefits and Medicaid for hardworking Americans who paid into these entitlement programs and deserve those hard-earned benefits. And unfortunately, the mainstream media has taken Mr. Musk out of context. I saw a Bloomberg headline that our team actually worked on getting updated and fixed because it was so wrong, and it took Mr. Musk out of context. What he was specifically referring to cutting was the waste and the fraud and abuse that does exist in these programs. According to an IG report from the Social Security Administration, there's more than $70 billion of fraud in the Social Security program alone that we know of. And so the president will continue to protect these programs for hardworking Americans, and actually cutting the waste, fraud, and abuse out of these programs will protect it for hardworking Americans.
So Musk himself on the South Lawn with the president today, when they weren't looking at cars, did say, get a bit of a mulligan, and did say he doesn't want to eliminate the programs. He wants to save them, and the only way to save them is to make them more effective and efficient and to not let there be waste, fraud, and abuse. Democrats will certainly stay on this. We'll be curious to see how much discipline Musk shows. He doesn't have a great history. Last thing I want to show you from the briefing is Caroline Leavitt sparring with an AP reporter about tariffs. The exchange, I think, is most illuminating for the end when she makes her disdain clear. Number 9, please.
Caroline,
you're welcome.
If we could just step back for a second. When President Trump last addressed the BRT when he was on the campaign trail, his big push was on tax cuts. He's going there today as he's proposing tax hikes in the form of tariffs.
Not true.
And I'm curious
he's not doing
why
that.
He's prioritizing that over the tax cuts.
He's actually not implementing tax hikes. Tariffs are a tax hike on foreign countries that, again, have been ripping us off. Tariffs are a tax cut for the American people. And the president is a staunch advocate of tax cuts. As you know, he campaigned on no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, no taxes on Social Security benefits. He is committed to all 3 of those things, and he expects Congress to pass them later this year.
I'm sorry, have you ever paid a tariff? Because I have.
That's
They
it.
don't get charged on foreign companies. They get charged on the importers.
And ultimately, when we have fair and balanced trade, which the American people have not seen in decades, as I said at the beginning, revenues will stay here, wages will go up, and our country will be made wealthy again. And I think it's insulting that you are trying to test my knowledge of economics and the decisions that this president has made. I'm now regret giving a question to the Associated Press. Mary, go.
All right, just again, live in the briefing room, things get said. I wouldn't have said, have you ever paid a tariff? I have, with the tone he did. I wouldn't have done that, but you know, it happened. But interesting moment. All right, last thing I want to show you. I continue to scan the field of Democrats, not just presidential candidates, but potential leaders of the party, people whose voices can be a counterweight to President Trump, who can rally Democrats across the country. What Republicans, or what Democrats rather, continue in many cases to not understand about Donald Trump is he leads a movement. And a movement's different than a campaign, and a movement's different than a normal political effort. One of the few Democrats since Barack Obama who has had any claim on leading a movement is Bernie Sanders. And he's been out and about last couple of weeks doing events in different states. And I don't believe Bernie Sanders will run for president in 2028. I don't believe he's got an opportunity to be a massive leader of the party. But I do believe it's incumbent upon reporters who are interested in the state of the country and the state of the left, and Democrats who are interested in where their leaders can come from, to study why does a guy from Brooklyn who's not particularly warm and fuzzy or telegenic or interested in retail campaigning, why does he have so much of a hold over tens of millions of Americans who believe in him? Let's listen. Number 10, please. Bernie Sanders.
The scariest times in my lifetime. That's all. I mean, I think that's objectively the truth. It is not just they want to give tax breaks to billionaires and cut programs for working people. Frankly, that's happened before. Yeah. But you combine that with the power of the oligarchy in general. You combine that with Mr. Musk owning Twitter and able to send out his messages to hundreds of millions of people. You combine that with the fact that people like Bezos, the second wealthiest person in the country, fired or got rid of most of his editorial staff and is going to convert them into a right-wing thing. Combine that with the fact that Trump is suing major media outlets and is threatening to investigate PBS and NPR. So it's not only the power of money, it's also combined with that, the movement toward authoritarianism. When Trump unilaterally cuts federal funding that was passed by Congress, that is illegal, that is unconstitutional. When you have the vice president saying, well, in his judgment, the courts don't have the right to stop unconstitutional acts of the president, man, that is authoritarianism. That's what the courts are. He is now trying to end what the founding fathers were pretty smart about, creating a form of government where there were checks and balances, a legislative body, an executive body, and a judiciary. So he's moving aggressively in all of these areas. Yeah, there was gravity in my voice. This is a scary moment.
All right, joining us now is my colleague from Two Ways, The Morning Meeting, Dan Turrentine. Dan, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Dan joined in part because of my internet issues, and so very grateful to you, Dan, for jumping in and being here. What is the appeal of Bernie Sanders now that allows him to draw pretty big crowds that you think is instructive for Democrats trying to figure out how to build a movement?
But Sanders and Trump share a lot of similar traits, which is that they're both incredibly authentic. They both are unafraid to kind of speak the truth and not back down when they're attacked. In fact, if anything, both of them tend to turn attacks into positives, kind of wear it as a badge of honor. Sanders did it very effectively against Hillary Clinton. And so I think, what Bernie Sanders was just talking about, tens of millions of people, and particularly in the base, strongly agree with him. And part of the Bernie base meets the Trump base when you kind of look at it as a circle. So I think, being yourself, being comfortable in your own skin, having a clear and concise message and delivering it. And when you're attacked and called crazy, telling people to kind of, kiss off is very appealing.
What about his issues agenda? Far to the left of anyone the Democrats have nominated for president. Are there things to learn from the appeal of his agenda, single payer, Medicare for all, and some of the other positions he has on the left?
Yeah, yes, there are, because, we talk on the morning meeting, Mark, a lot about Trump's appeal to the working class voter, his appeal to RFK voters. Look, the winning campaigns don't just appeal to the base or just to the middle. Donald Trump's able to have Silicon Valley and Wall Street, as well as, auto workers and Bernie voters. I think the party has got to find a way to appeal to his voters. And what he focuses on primarily, although not just in that clip, is on the economy, on working class issues. It's where he really kind of, got to Hillary Clinton, because he just drilled down on the working class. It's, how he won Michigan. And so I think, he is onto something, just as Trump is. And whoever is going to be our nominee has got to find a way to bring his voters in and speak to them in a way that Sanders does. Some of what he says is probably not a winning general election message, but he's got strengths.
All right, Dan, thank you. Stay with us if you can. Gil, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind tonight after you unmute. Got to unmute, Gil. You had to lean in there and unmute that.
Let's click it on the wrong. Let's click it on the wrong. I got it.
There you go. Welcome in.
Yeah, I'm near Charlotte, North Carolina, and I guess my question is in the area of tariffs. I don't complete. I think I know it's a more complicated thing than my question is going to suggest, but I don't understand that if country A has got a tariff that's unfair, then all the players know it's unfair. Trump knows it's unfair. Company A knows it's not. Country A knows it's unfair, and so then Trump's going to match them, and so their advantage goes away. They have an opportunity to raise it, like Canada's threatening, so they get the advantage back, and then Trump raises it again. And so there's not a real winner in that concept, in that situation. And certainly country A has to make some judgment as to why they're doing the resistance. Is it a political one? Do they feel they have a better economic advantage? How do they go through thinking about their willingness to resist? And the same with Canada. Canada's making all these threats, but the power, economic power that the U.S. would appear to have over Canada seems to be stronger. So how does Canada think through their ability to wait that out, or how to play it?
That's a very shrewd question. You've done a good job of explaining the ambiguities that even many of the experts couldn't actually give you a rational answer to. But I'll let Dan give a first crack at responding to, again, you framed it very well.
I think you channeled President Trump's thinking, which is ultimately we're the biggest economy. We have more throw weight and power or levers to pull in a standoff with really anybody. China obviously is a fairly close second. But the question is, how long are we willing as a country to tolerate this disruption? Let's just say some pain. And it's the same trade-offs for the Canadians or any company caught in between who relies on both countries. And, look at what happened yesterday with one market move. If you recall, in the first term, Trump had a lot of exemptions. All the farmers in the Midwest that they paid almost, I think, $17 billion to with subsidies, so that they wouldn't feel the pain of what China was trying to do intentionally to Midwestern farmers. So it's a great, it's a game of brinksmanship. And the question is, who's going to blink?
Well, I understand that that's the theory, and people like you discuss it in those terms. But if I'm in the Canadian leadership and I know what the economics are, and I know how well positioned or not well positioned I am, do they truly comprehend that situation, or are they in some kind of a bubble that really prevents them from understanding their predicament? And the same would be for other countries. Like in France, I know they have a very strong agricultural lobby that's really holding them back. And so there could be political issues that enter the picture. But it just seems to me that most people who know the tariff situation already know what the answers are. It's just a matter of how they choose to play. And so are they just naive about the consequences or what?
No, I think you'll again. You're asking the right questions, but it's a little bit hard to say because it's not as linear as it might be. So there are three variables that haven't been raised in the conversation, either by you or Dan, that I think are instructive to understanding kind of an answer to what you're asking. First of all, non-tariff trade barriers. Okay, there's a lot of those in Europe. There's a lot of them in Asia. It's what caused a backlash against Japan in the 80s because they had and they continue to have a lot of non-tariff barriers. These ways that they keep American banks out or retail out. Okay, so that's a factor here, and they're playing the game of saying, well, we don't want tariffs because in a tariff war, they're numbers and specifics. The non-tariff barriers are fuzzier. They're harder to ferret out. They're harder to evaluate. Second is we have a disadvantage because we can't produce things as cheaply as they do in other countries, and that imbalance is something that is just a reality of these trade wars. And President Trump is trying to use his leverage of the United States to make it possible to basically, you can say, blackmail or pressure foreign manufacturers, and he's announced some of these to build things here in this country. That's a way around a trade war because what does he want? He wants more things built here, wants better jobs, good jobs at good wages here. The last variable, and this goes to what's going on now is President Trump is, I say this in air quotes, he's a madman, right? You don't know what he's going to do. So you say, are the Canadians naive? They're hoping that he goes back to behaving in a more linear way, in a way most American presidents have behaved, and to back off as he does repeatedly. So if you're the Canadians or any other country that's faced this or will face it, you have to look at the record and say, there's a chance he'll back off. There's a chance that we can buy him off with some incremental behavior. President Trump's belief is, and a lot of the American people believe this, that America's been ripped off. And I know a lot of people in my business, a lot of Democrats kind of mock that and say it's just rhetoric. Well, it's not just rhetoric. First of all, a lot of the American people believe it. And second, particularly these non-tariff trade barriers have caused the United States to be ripped off. I mean, it's a joke how little penetration. Banking is the example I use all the time. American banks just aren't allowed to be in the marketplace in a lot of these countries. So he wants to leverage America's power. He wants to expose the non-tariff barriers. He wants to get American companies in these other places. He wants to get a manufacturing paid for by other people in this country. And the Canadians and others are saying, well, eventually he'll get enough that he'll give up the trade war and go home. So I don't think they're being irrational so much as trying to play an asymmetrical hand. They're better shape because in every case, even Canada, they can manufacture more cheaply. They're in better shape because they have non-tariff barriers. They're in worse shape because they're not run by a mad person, and they're in worse shape because they don't have the leverage of the United States. That's the best I can do in answering your very excellent but really unanswerable question. Except that they're not naive. They're just playing an asymmetrical hand.
Oh, again, my little statement here. It sounds to me like this is just an international version of poker.
Yeah, I'd say poker with a like whatever the equivalent between chess and three-dimensional chess is of poker. It's complicated poker. Maybe there's eight suits rather than four, and Trump changes the rules because he doesn't play by the rules. The parallel thing I think is instructive to think about, which is NATO, right? The American people, I think in the main, agree with Trump. NATO's been ripping us off. They haven't been paying their fair share of defense of their own countries. And Donald Trump just said, I'm not going to play by those rules. It's the same on trade. He's not going to play by the same rules, and these countries have to deal with it. And it's like poker because there's folding and there's bluffing and there's living to fight another day by playing the next hand. Gil, thank you. Really great question.
Mark, you muted yourself accidentally.
Jason, welcome in. Thank you for the great question previously. Jason, tell folks where you are after you unmute. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mark, Dan, thanks so much. It really dovetails. Jason Kraut from Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Appreciate everything that you guys are doing. One of the things in even listening to the stock market changes and stuff that you've done recently, very, very enlightening with the tariffs and everything. But don't you think there's also a refocus from Wall Street to Main Street that's going on here, where Trump, take him at his word, he really doesn't care what the market does at this point if he keeps his coalition of Main Street voters together. And there is going to have to be a transfer of wealth from Wall Street to Main Street. Companies trading at 23 plus times price to earnings ratios. I mean, that's not sustainable. Warren Buffett ID'd it 2 years ago and has got all his cash on the sidelines before Trump even looked like he was going to win re-election. And then the other thing that I would find very, very fascinating when you look at NATO and you look at trade and you look at tariffs, none of this works without the United States Navy protecting, defending all by itself trade routes and making sure that ships go through. Look what happens when the Houthis shoot a couple rockets at a couple freightliners, and all of a sudden you can't get insurance on these carriers and the whole thing stops. So I think that's also a factor I would like to hear on what the Trump administration is going to do with the United States Navy, the trade routes, what Europe and others look at. And then don't forget about the bond market. Look at what happened to Europe when they said, oh, well, we don't need the U.S. on this Ukraine deal. We'll borrow the money and step up and do everything. I mean, they are screwed on what their bond looks like. Every country except for Germany that has the constitutional prohibitions from going into debt. I knew I threw a lot out, but I've been listening for about 2 weeks now on all of that, and had my opportunity just to dovetail Jason, all of that. I'll shut up and thank you.
Thank you for that, Jason. Before Dan picks which of the topics you raised he wants to address, there are reports now that the Department of Education is going to cut about half of the number of employees on the road to attempting to eliminate the department. But they say now they're gonna fire, maybe offer buyouts to almost 50%. Dan, pick up on whatever Jason mentioned you'd like to.
Sure. I think your first point is a really interesting one, which is the idea of Wall Street to Main Street. I mentioned earlier, part of Trump's success is he appeals to both, or he has historically. His coalition, again, we talk a lot the last couple of months. Silicon Valley now loves him. The crypto industry loves him. And, Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, they both worked on Wall Street. I think that Trump does, I believe, care about the stock market. At least in his first term, he was very quick to always talk about the numbers. Even in the clip Mark played earlier, he was bragging about his first term and the stock market's performance. So I do believe he deep down does care. But to your point, the secret to his success is he does appeal to the working class because he focuses and fights like a laser beam on their behalf, right? He's very, very clear. I want factories coming back. I want workers, to feel the benefits they did in his first term, pay raised, etc. So I think the trick is, can you do both? And I think that, you don't want Wall Street to tank. Those are real companies listed on there, not just the Fortune 100. So it's hard to see it going down and small and mid caps doing well. So I think he'll try to do both. And I think as far as your other questions, we are the world's policemen as a rule. And, that goes to Trump's hand, right? Most of the world is a beggar of us, not the other way around. And he's decided to use that to get what he can on behalf of the American people.
Jason, thank you. Great topics. And Joe, welcome, and tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind.
Hey, Mark and Dan. I'm from Central Jersey. I was on last week. I was talking a little bit about Doge. Thanks for taking my call. I really just kind of have a comment about the whole tariff thing. Um, Part of Trump's charm is the fact that he is heavy-handed and he makes these, moves that sort of ruffle everybody's feathers. But I think when it comes to Canada, Rich Lowry had a really good editorial in the Post about the fact that we're picking on Canada. We have a huge trade surplus with Canada, and it's almost like we're like the bully, and we're picking on them. And yes, we're going to get a response, but part of it is I worry. I'm not philosophically opposed to tariffs. I think we ultimately all want fairness, but at the same time, I'm not sure picking on Canada is going to, in the long run, help us. Right? Again, huge trade surplus, and the fact that we seem to be driving their voters away from sort of the pro-America feeling that they've always had. And we could drive them into the opposition's hands. And then we have someone who is very anti-Trump at the top of the ticket in Canada. So, I'm really concerned. Again, philosophically, not a problem with tariffs, but I'm not so sure picking on Canada is the way to go.
Dan.
Yeah, I look at something that I think a lot of people have wondered, which is what is he really getting at with Canada? I've always assumed it's because they're the weakest in the chain. If you looked at Mexico, China, and the EU and Canada's your easiest target because they're the smallest economy. We have a surplus, but it's a smaller trade percentage than with those other countries. And I think something we haven't talked about is who may Canada turn to do business with? China. There's a huge Chinese footprint in Vancouver. They have relations with the country. There's talk about China in Africa and filling kind of USAID's holes that are now left all over the world. They obviously have their belts and suspenders program. So it's a great question. I really don't know what Trump is driving at. I don't believe it's about fentanyl. Maybe now today it's aluminum and lumber. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, I think he jumps around. I mean, I think if we were more subtle in our approach, I think it would be a lot better. And I think we would look a little bit better in the eyes of most Canadians. And I say that as a Trump voter and a supporter. It wasn't my first choice, but certainly, a more positive choice than a Democrat. So,
Joe, thank you. Thanks for coming, Joe. Great questions. Tom, welcome back. Thanks for coming. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind.
Yeah, I'm in northern California, and I'm so excited that Dan's joining us. I usually only watch him on replay in the morning since I'm on West Coast time. I wanted to call out an interesting contradiction, which is that Trump won partly because of his promise to lower prices. And he then is implementing all these tariffs, and he talks about reciprocal tariffs as if that's the end game. I think it ignores the fact that if there were no tariffs at all from any countries, we would be paying more for goods that are produced in the US because our labor costs are sometimes 10 times more than these developing countries that we're importing from. So I'm not against buying more American-made goods, but I think we have to level with the American people that that's going to cost more than the goods made in Mexico and Vietnam. And I think he's trying to tell his followers that somehow prices will go down by raising tariffs, or that tariffs are effectively a tax cut or a tax credit for the American people. And that's just not true.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's a great point. I mean, it's a tricky balance because, as you say, if the sweatshirt that Walmart sells was made in North Carolina, where there used to be a thriving textile industry, it'd be $50. It's $10 because, right, the people making it are getting 25 cents in Vietnam. On the other hand, one of the things that Trump does deserve credit for is his tariff play, combined with what he did on energy, did make it more cost efficient for certain companies to bring manufacturing back to the United States. And so to what extent he's able to get industries to relocate or overseas industry rather than putting it in Mexico or Canada for Honda to put it here. A job earned is a great thing.
And I'm all for that, Dan.
Right.
Then let's just level with the American people that we're going to bring more things onshore, and they will cost more because we're not going to pay our workers 25 cents a shirt the way they do in Vietnam. That's just not fair to Americans. But you're going to have to pay more.
Yep.
You're right, Tom. Tom, thank you. Very thoughtful. Appreciate it. All right. As we bring Eric in, let me read something. Let me read something from the New York Times. The Education Department announced on Tuesday it was firing more than 1,300 workers, effectively gutting the agency that manages federal loans for college, tracks student achievement, and enforces civil rights laws in schools. The layoffs mean that the department, which started the year with 4,133 employees, will now have a workforce of about half that size after less than 2 months with President Trump in office. In addition to the 1,315 workers who were fired on Tuesday, 572 employees accepted separation packages offered in recent weeks, and 63 probationary workers were terminated last month. Erica, welcome in. I know you're interested in this. Tell us what's on your mind.
So there's a bit of Armageddon at the Department of Education today, and I think this was not supposed to break until about 6 o'clock, but we did see some stories about an hour before that. And I just wanted to sort of let people know, since I already can see like Brandy Weingarten's head will explode on national television in the next 24 hours. What we know is completely safe and untouched are Title I and the IDEA funds for special education. So I think that as we begin to hear people freaking out about this, which they inevitably will, it is important to understand that these are cuts of staff that basically interface with one another. These are internal people in the department who don't really have any contact with students, parents, teachers, or school leaders. And so I'm sort of just trying to like calm people down. I'm not here to sort of to cheerlead for the department by any means. I've sort of been out there saying that all of these claims that they're going to abolish the department are kind of ridiculous because the president can't abolish the department. But I do think it's important for people to understand that as we've seen this department grow in numbers exponentially, student outcomes have declined. We are in what I would consider to be like a 5-alarm fire literacy crisis. And so there is no evidence that this, over 4,000 employees, and according to what I know, 1,000 of them are GS-14s and 1,000 are GS-15s. So we're talking big jobs for people that can't really point to any improvements for students. So school lunches, untouched. They're not even part of this department. Special education funding in Title I, untouched. There are going to be big changes in the Office of Civil Rights. They are closing a lot of regional offices. That includes San Francisco, New York, Boston, Chicago, Dallas, and Cleveland. It seems to me that they think they're going to be able to use their 600 lawyers in a DC-based way to deal with all the complaints coming in, and there are a lot of complaints coming in. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. I also know that they said it was going to be $500 million in savings per year. And the last thing I'll say, the department that is going to see the least cuts is the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services. And the agency seeing the most cuts is IES, which is the Institute of Education Sciences, where they do a lot of research.
Erica, tell folks who don't know why you know so much about this.
Well, I work for an education advocacy organization called Parents Defending Education. And I also spent many years teaching. I was an NEA member in 2 states. And so this is just kind of my beat. I got some information about this earlier today that I thought would be, again, helpful. And since I know how education cuts play in the media, and I know that we're going to see a lot of misinformation, it's not really is this good or is it bad? It's more like, let's just make sure people have the facts, and that parents who have children with special education, services, or schools that get a ton of Title I money I know we're going to hear that that's all going away, and that's just not true. So if people want to say, I don't like the idea of bureaucrats in the department being let go, I believe that the DOE needed 6 comms teams, and I believe that groups of 5 or 6 employees need their own office managers. Like, we can have that debate, but I really don't want parents to panic, even though I sort of feel quite positive that within the next couple hours, that's what I'm going to see.
Right. Erica, really helpful. I'm getting a lot of questions from folks asking how you know all this, because it's not been reported in the press yet. So, for instance, how do you know that special ed is untouched?
Because I was part of an embargoed bit of information about an hour and a half ago, and we got some information, and that was one of the things. Not to mention, I also know IDEA and Title I are federal mandates. Unless Congress decides that they're going to reduce that funding, the executive branch cannot eliminate or reduce that funding.
Yeah.
Well, they've in other agencies, they've dared people to stop them on it, but we'll see. To your point, Erica, do you think then? Sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Do you? So you do know a lot about education. It seems like you have a good amount of detail. You say these are more kind of back office people. I don't know how well you know kind of the inner workings of the Department of Education. Do you think some of these employees provide valuable support to the people on the front lines? Or do you think it's become, as you say, one too many cooks at the kitchen?
I think that the Department of Education has largely become, especially the past 4 years and before that, to a hyper-politicized organization. If you're asking me, do I think that that we will see equally or better outcomes for children with 2,200 or 2,000 instead of 4,000? My answer is yes. So while I don't want to denigrate the work of public servants, and I know that there are people tonight probably panicking that they're going to be part of this reduction in force, and I truly do sincerely understand that that is not a good place to be. I also think that this bureaucratic bloat, particularly in K-12, has gotten out of control and needs to be reined in. And I would just say, the agency that's seeing the most cuts, their director, whose name eludes me at the moment, but he was the director under Trump and Biden, he did a webinar in public recently and said the only way to save that agency is to unleash a bull in a china shop, let them break stuff, and then potentially get back on track. But he had tried so hard to make an impact and make it an agency that was worthwhile, where the longitudinal studies weren't useless by the time they came out. And even he, again, running the agency that's getting the most cuts, he came out and said publicly, like, there is just no way to reform this unless you begin to break stuff. And that appears to be what's happening tonight.
I want to ask you both a question. You mentioned the theoretically exploding head of Randy Weingarten, the head of the teachers union. I've heard very little of their critiques of the moves, of the firings. I'm not sure they'll break through on whatever they have to say about the today's firings. Do you have a sense of, Erica, of what their strategy is? Does the teachers union have a strategy, the two unions, to deal with this, or are they just being overwhelmed?
I think they're in a really tough position. I saw an interview with Randy over the weekend where suddenly, she's flipping out about missed opportunities for kids. And she's talking about how, I think this was about school choice. And, she's talking about how all these opportunities at private schools. But the problem is she did everything in her power to keep schools closed as long as possible. She denied opportunities to children. And she knows that those same kids that were stuck at home, in some cases for 18 months, people who live in places where the schools barely closed don't understand that in some places kids did not go to school for 18 months. So, and those same kids, their neighbors that were in private school were in school almost the whole time. So Randy's got a big problem because she's a relentless activist, and she's always been kind of a nightmare in my personal opinion. But COVID made it that she just has no standing to talk about any of this. And so, again, I saw her over the weekend. I think it was MSNBC going on and on about some school choice bill that she, of course, hates. But again, that's going to be hard for her to do when she denied. I mean, she quite literally worked tirelessly with the Biden administration to keep the doors of schools locked in the cities where she had a lot of power.
Dan.
Yeah, we have 4 boys and 3 were in private school at the time. Our youngest did not go to school from March of 20 until September of 22 and has paid a significant price for that. I think, Eric is right, Mark. I think the reason the teachers union has been somewhat quiet here is within the party, there is a recognition that mistakes were made during COVID and they have not really owned up to their role in it. And people are hesitant to come out and rally behind the teachers union. So, I think we're going to have to see. Look, we don't know enough about these cuts. I mean, I assume everything Erica is saying is true. I assume that we need more information to know. Look, this education is something that is a huge issue in the Democratic Party. I'm sure we are going to hear in the next few hours, Rachel Maddow tonight, or Jen Psaki, we'll probably have somebody on talking about this, and we'll hear their point of view about what happened.
Okay. And I also,
can
I just say one thing, Mark? I don't want people to think I'm some crazy partisan Republican. I'm not. And I live in Rhode Island, where we had, I think, if not the only Democratic governor, one of only 2 who basically kept schools open.
Yeah.
So this was not something that everybody was terrible on, but certainly Randy Weingarten was uniquely terrible. And so I think she's going to have a hard time, reconciling what she's going to be saying probably in the next couple of days. And again, these are not really people who touch children and touch, like, for example, I have 3 sons, by the way, so I'm incredibly, what's the word I'm looking, in awe of you, Dan, that you have 4. But when we talk about how much kids struggle and how much they need remediation, particularly in math and reading, we all know this. I'm not sure that any of the people being cut from the Department of Education would make a difference for kids when it comes to what they need. I just truly believe that. And I say that as a parent and as somebody with a lot of experience in education.
Erica, thank you. We love having you on. Thanks for coming on. And Dan, thank you for being there when we needed you, just in case I couldn't get back on. So grateful to you, as always, having you on, and we'll see you at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you, sir. All right. So tonight, in about an hour, here where I am, it's a new show, and I hope you'll all join. You can't watch it on YouTube, but you can watch it on the two-way platform. So it's called Table 17. I'm going to pick up my camera and do something unorthodox here and show y'all the restaurant I'm in. This is the Olive Tree Cafe. You can see the cameras back there, the equipment. We're all getting ready because in just a little bit, we'll be here doing a new show, Table 17. Music, comedy. Senator Bob Kerrey, who lives in Greenwich Village, where I am, will join us. I really hope you'll make time to join. Go to tway.tv/table17 if you haven't already to get the registration you need to join us live on Two-Way to watch this great program of music, great band, comedy, conversation. 8 o'clock Eastern time tonight. Tomorrow, Two-Way, on Two-Way, the morning program, the morning meeting. Dan, Sean, and I will be here. Then at 5 o'clock tomorrow night, Megan's back. Megan's show is on Monday through Fridays. Megan's guest, Billy Binion, Emily Dominich, both great guests. Tune in for Megan's show, please, at 5 o'clock. This program, as you know, is sponsored by the Bonson Group. David Bonson was on the morning meeting this morning. Extremely interesting and informative and informed person about the economy. I recommend to you his newsletter. It's called The Dividend Cafe. I strongly recommend you subscribe. It's a free newsletter about the economy. David writes with expertise and clarity about the economy. I read it. You should too. Please go to Google Dividend Cafe Bonson, subscribe now, or you can go to our website for the link. That's tway.tv/TBG, the Bonson Group, to watch it. I will see you at 8 o'clock tonight, right here on the Two-Way platform for the first episode of a show I am super excited about. Join, you'll see what it's about. Music, comedy, conversation. Table 17, see you at 8 Eastern. Thank you for joining. Thanks to Dan and to everybody who raised their hand. See you at 8.